Can you hear me okay?
I can now. If at some point I need to turn off my video in order to be heard, I'll do that. I hope that doesn't happen, but yeah. I am going to start the meeting called to order. And I know we have public comment. We have one public comment that I've gotten so far. Kathy, are there any others?
No, that's the only one that's come in.
Okay, so I'm going to read the one that we have received so far. We have had one public comment for this meeting from Teresa Alt. The topic is Tompkins County Housing and Economic Development Committee. The TCAD report says, and I'll quote, the TCIDA adopted an affordable housing policy that gives applicants an option of making 20% of residential units available to households earning 80% or less of area median income, or paying a fee per unit of at closing that would support the Tompkins County Community Housing Development Fund, end quote. The report goes on to describe the fund, but I think all of you are quite familiar with that fund. The report does not say what the opt-out fee was set at. I suspect they do not dare to say how pathetically low it is. That fee is $5,000 per each of the total number of units in the project, or to put it another way, $25,000 per unit that should have been affordable, but instead will be market rate. This is no way matches the difference between, say, a market rate rent of, say, $1,900 for a small apartment compared to an affordable rent of $1,200. That's a difference of $700 per month, or $8,400 per year, or $84,000 per 10 years. That suggests what such a fee should be. At least $84,000 for a one-bedroom, tweaked a bit for larger or smaller units, depending on the mix in the project. The IDA implies that what the housing fund puts out per unit determines their fees. The tiny amounts that the County Housing Development Fund typically gives per unit not only do not pay for construction of a unit, they are not even enough to cover a funding gap. They are just tokens of approval. But this history is not reason to keep the housing fund in its present impoverished state. I know that this is something that we were going to talk about during this meeting. So I am putting that in the record as a comment from the public. And then we can touch on the updates to the IDA later in this meeting. Any changes to the agenda? Not seeing any changes to the agenda. We have minutes approval. June 25th, 2020. Can I have someone move that? I have Annie moving that. Mike seconds. I'm going to do a roll call for approval for the June 25th. Annie?
Yes.
Mike? Yes. Martha?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Great. That is myself as well. That is unanimous. That passes. July 7th. Can I have someone move those meeting minutes?
Move.
Mike moves it. Martha seconds. Does anybody have any comments or questions about these minutes? Any changes they would like to see? All right, not seeing any. Roll call. Annie?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Martha?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
And myself also. That is unanimous. I am going to the only adjustment that I have for the chair's report, I've talked to Katie Borgella and David West and Megan about a state announcement that we received this weekend that I think I have mentioned to some of you, if not all of you, briefly announced it at the legislature on Tuesday. Which is that the most recent RFP round that our projects through the Community Housing Development Fund often apply to, which is the 9% program through the Homes and Community Renewal that our projects apply to for low-income housing tax credits. The RFP for that program was cut by 60%, as were a series of other housing programs at the state level for this year. So I had asked, I received this information from the director, Johanna Anderson, for INHS, and was hoping she might be able to join us today. But she had a last minute emergency that she had to take care of. So she's not able to join us today, but said she would keep us abreast of any updates that she receives. We do have David here, our housing guru. So I'd love to hear if you have gotten any further information, or we'll just keep up to date as information rolls out.
Sure, thanks, Anna. I did just want to share, we have looked through this RFP and the last RFP, and it is really big difference. But there is one thing I wanted to point out, which is that the plan for this year was to have 2 RFPs in the year. They were supposed to be one in April and one in October. Obviously, the April one didn't happen, and we're just getting this summer one. This RFP does say that there will be another one, or at least that they're still planning to have another one. Obviously, we don't have any guarantee of that. You know, we were expecting one in April and it didn't happen. I hope that there will be another round towards the end of this year, as that is what was planned in the past. This was supposed to be the first year to have 2 RFPs in the year, so it wouldn't be surprising to me to see, you know, the RFP only be for 50% of what last year's was, because there's supposed to be 2 of them. But again, we can't guarantee that that second one will actually come, but the current one does state within the RFP that they are currently planning on having another one.
So David, if they do the second one, then this 60% cut is not necessarily as big and dramatic as it sounds. If they were not intending to increase, it would be more like a 10% cut.
Yeah, I mean, by program, it varies. It wasn't a flat 60%. Some of them seemed like significantly more than 60%. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if there are cuts, and the state is also having their own rental assistance program. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of this money was diverted to that program as well.
And based on some of the comments in the letter I wrote, I think it's important that people understand the Community Housing Development Fund. It is not a fund where the grants are used directly for the creation of affordable housing up to date. It has been used to leverage and improve the competitiveness of grants that our applicants have sent to the state for low-income housing tax credits. So, I think it's important that people understand that to date, there are changes that are happening, expansions that are happening with the Community Housing Development Fund that are allowing for the inclusion of significantly smaller projects. But then it changes the ratio, of course, or the impact of the $100,000, $200,000, or $300,000 grants that we have been giving, around that $300,000 being the max that we've given. It changes the impact of them if the project is somewhere between 2 and 12 units, as opposed to previous projects that we had ranges up to over 100 units. So I just wanted to make that clear, because it does seem to be a misunderstanding of the nature of the fund and what it's used to leverage. I don't know, David or Martha, who is the chair of that committee, if you had anything you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, we have had several smaller projects that don't go through the laborious and very complex LIHTC program. The smaller ones tend to be, the 2 or 4 units, or even we've had one with 1, where the housing fund money is the only subsidy. So it is a direct subsidy that is sort of dollar for dollar the main benefit that those developers get to enable those projects to be built. The 60%, David, it's interesting. Quick math, right? We were wondering when the announcement was that there'd be 2 rounds. The question was, well, okay, they're just going to split it, or will it be more money? So this sounds like, yeah, the intention was always to split it. So the first round is 50% of the full year's allotment. So then if the full cut in this RFP is 60%. So it seems that sounds in line with Cuomo's cutting everything 20%. So if they're cutting 10% of this round, then perhaps 10% of the next round. I don't know, is this the glass half full interpretation? Whatever it is. So I hope the applicants that we have in the community have, are still going to go for it. And we certainly do hope there's an October round.
Megan, did you have anything you wanted to add to this update?
No, I think we'll continue to talk with INHS since Johanna wasn't able to make it today, and really just monitor the information as it comes out. David's going to talk a little bit more about CDBG and things later in this meeting, but we're kind of just getting it in trickles as things come out.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for keeping us updated. Hopefully it's less disturbing than it sounds by the end of the year. I know that we have a lot of projects. As the fund, Community Housing Development Fund, becomes more well-known in the community, we've had more and more projects, and we've been successful in creating continual increased number of affordable housing units. And actually on that note, Megan, in the last 2 years alone, do you have an estimate of how many affordable housing units, and when I say affordable housing, I mean 80% AMI or less for the majority. So these aren't just modest decreases in rent, feel-good decreases in rent. These are actual qualifying, according to the definition from National on affordable housing, which is 80% area median income or less. How many units we've created just in the last 2 years through this fund or supported?
That gets a little complicated in terms of what we're considering. Is it things that opened in the last 2 years or things that went to construction in the last 2 years? So we could give you numbers in different ways. I will say that we found that except for, I think, a couple projects by Conifer, there really haven't been any additional, fully kind of formally affordable units created without Community Housing Development Fund awards, except for maybe a couple of projects over the last 10 or 15 years. So basically since the fund's, creation, it's been pretty vital to be a source of leveraging, not just for the tax credits and for state agencies, but it's also important for private financing as well. With oftentimes we're providing letters, to developers for their bankers as well. So certainly the program itself does not have the resources to fund a complete project, but it's that leverage factor, and so that's why we're concerned and definitely going to be paying attention to any changes from these state pieces of that leverage funding.
And since we're already talking about housing, I'm going to put a few people who are committee members on the spot. I see Heather just joined as well. I know there are many people who are interested in the affordable housing requirements or policy of the IDA. That was obviously brought up in the letter. We have Martha, we have Mike, we have Ann Koreman here also. And I see Heather McDaniels, who is the administrator for the IDA. And director of TCAD. If you all could give us a little bit of background, maybe Heather, on the policy that has been created, where it is in the process. There's some concern that we have heard, and I'm not sure if you heard in the beginning, I read a letter from the public about the amount being small and not able to be leveraged to create significant shifts in affordable housing. So that was the tenor, but I'd love to hear what people's thoughts are who have been integral in creating that policy.
Sure, thank you. So for many years, the IDA has talked about its ability to support more affordable housing development. The downtown development policy that we have partnered with the city of Ithaca on for almost 20 years now was really aimed at incentivizing creating density and a more urban environment downtown. And before that policy went into place, there had been no large-scale investment downtown. So it has really served its purpose to do that. Every single project financially needed some sort of incentive to make their project work. And we're still seeing that as pretty much the case today. However, the IDA has delivered incentives to a number of affordable housing projects over the years. To 10 Hancock was one, the Ithaca Art House project that's under construction, fully affordable units, a smaller project on Seneca Street that should get underway sometime this year. However, in discussions, really looking at a way that the IDA might be able to support more affordable housing without providing a large amount of foregone tax dollars. The big incentive that the IDA has is that they can phase in new property taxes. And county government, municipal governments, they need that tax base. So we had looked at several iterations. So this policy actually was drafted, a subcommittee of the IDA that includes IDA members and city staff, city elected officials, someone from Ithaca Neighborhood Housing Services. A pretty good group of folks have met, have looked at the policy. The IDA actually adopted the policy at its meeting in July. What the policy really is aimed at is providing a mechanism to support more affordable housing. So there are two options for any project that's otherwise already eligible for an IDA incentive that has housing units in their project. They will need to do one or the other. The first is provide at least 20% of the units as affordable to households earning 80% of median income or less. Those projects will need to have some sort of monitoring and compliance that is set up through another agency, whether it's a low-income housing tax credit project, and they're being monitored by another entity, or the city of Ithaca might want to take some of that on. But there is an option for projects that are delivering housing to set aside 20% of their at least 20% of their units for affordable units. The other option for market rate projects that might not be in a position where they can readily go look at doing all the monitoring and the compliance, and that's not really what their business is about. They can pay into a fund. We looked at several different scenarios, and essentially what we came up with was 20%, if they were to put 20% of those units as affordable units, we asked for a payment of $25,000 for 20% of the units. The way the policy is written, it says $5,000 for all of the number of units in the project. And looking at those numbers, that essentially negates probably the year one property tax incentive, which is the first year of the incentive. It's 100% incentive, 100% of the new tax base. And then we usually phase in the taxes over a period of time. So that first year when, they've spent all the money on construction, the project is up and running, they're not cash flowing yet, they're not going to get really any property tax incentive. And upfront, they're going to have to pay more. So it's going to be a process to see if projects are financially feasible, if they're able to make that one-time payment, and if the projects can still work. What we did in setting that number, $5,000 per unit, we did look at the Community Housing Development Fund, which has been in operation for 10 years now. It has a really good track record. It's a partnership between the county, the city, and Cornell University. And over that term, they've delivered funding to support the development of 654 units of housing. The average investment from that fund has been about $7,100 per unit of housing developed. Of course, all those projects have been able to leverage other local, state, and federal funds to make their projects work. It has, provided a mechanism where there's some local support to get those projects off the ground. So our hope is that we'll have a couple of larger housing projects in the next couple of years that will pay that amount up front. It will capitalize the Community Housing Development Fund, and they'll be able to deliver more to projects over the next couple of years and then into the future.
So you all looked at a $1,000, $3,000, $5,000 option and ultimately have voted on the 5,000. Is that correct?
Yes.
The other a question that I had then, amounts above that. Part of what it seems is missing often from the conversation, at least from my experience, is the understanding that that the numbers. It's not that the numbers need to work out for the developer; the numbers need to work out for the financer. And I from the pro formas that I've seen, Heather, you have worked on. That is the balancing act for the most part, correct?
Well, it does need to work for the financer for it to be financed, but for the developer, this is their business. They need a return on investment. So if it doesn't cash flow, the project doesn't work.
Sure. Sure. But the cash on hand going into the investment is significantly smaller typically. It has to work for the developer, but the initial funds are often coming from bank loans, correct?
Yes.
So I think it's that conversation, when we think about a private loan for any individual of what a bank is willing to loan, they certainly do look at an individual's wealth and balance and resources on whether or not it is a safe investment. And that is also a balancing act that developers are doing. That seems to be an important part of this conversation. But I do appreciate that we are one of the only IDAs in the state that is looking to develop an affordable housing policy. Is that correct?
There are other IDAs in the state. There are a number in Long Island that do have affordable housing policies. They require that all of the policies that I have seen do not provide any additional incentive, and they require some sort of set aside that is either required by the municipality, and the municipality through their zoning code is requiring and doing the monitoring and the compliance, or they rely on another third party that would do monitoring and compliance.
And they're commensurate to what we have designed here? Were they used as?
I have never seen anywhere they have provided a mechanism for a payment in lieu. It's really either it's been required by the municipality through their zoning. So by default, the IDA is just, saying, oh, here's what the city requires, so you have to do it if you're coming to us as well. Or it's just affordable housing projects like 210 Hancock or something like that they will deliver a 7 or 10 year incentive for.
Any of that,
Yeah.
Martha?
Yeah, I'm sensitive to the fact that this wasn't on the agenda. It's already half hour into the meeting, but I want to say a couple things, which is that, Heather mentioned inclusionary zoning. The city looked at inclusionary zoning and didn't do it. The city said the CTAP needed to include affordable housing, and they've started to vote on a 10% number of units, and that would be required. And then somebody at the last minute on the floor said, oh, make it 20%. It should be 20% affordable units. And then that's what they voted. the IDA took a much more thoughtful and careful approach, actually looked at numbers, actually talked to people who build housing. And it's really critical that we don't disincentivize housing construction. We don't want to make it so hard to be able to build housing that these projects go away. That doesn't help anybody. The other thing people need to know is that any public subsidy, whether it's federal tax credits, whether it's state money, whether it's local money, whether it's foregone taxes, which is what abatements are, that's us. That's not magic money. That comes from all the other residents of the community. So you really have to balance this. If you're going to forego, hundreds of thousands of dollars per unit by doing requiring 20% affordable units in every development. And we looked at the numbers and it was something like $300,000, $350,000 per unit in lost taxes. Well, who do we think pays that? All the rest of us, which makes housing less affordable for everyone. So this is a way more complex equation, way more complex issue than people want it to be, frankly. So what we did was promise to take a look at this. I think built into the policies that we're going to look at this in a year, formally review the policy and the results in a year, and make sure that projects have still been able to go ahead and see what's happened with them. The benefit of putting money into the Community Housing Development Fund is the leverage, is that it's $1, way better bang for the buck than the other options we looked at. So everybody should stay tuned, and I'm glad that we've got this going, and the Housing Fund will certainly be able to use the money.
Right. And I also, in interest of time, Martha, thank you for that information. We do need to move forward. The IDA is an independent agency, so I appreciate the reporting out, at least to keeping us informed. Maybe there will be other questions that will come in and we can add those more formally to an agenda. But I do appreciate the updates. One last question. If the CTAP has or continues to push forward with inclusionary zoning, it can be in concert with this, or is that not moving forward?
Look, the city can do zoning. That has nothing to do with the IDA.
Correct. It has nothing to do with the IDA.
Yeah, and
there's been any word.
Yeah, the CTAP has really always been a partnership between the IDA and the city. So the Community Investment Incentive Tax Abatement Program, that's the mechanism that projects come through the city to the IDA. What I'm doing now is working with the city to make sure that that policy works in tandem and does not conflict with the IDA's policy, so that projects can apply through the city, they go through the city process, and then they come to the IDA. And so hopefully we'll be able to get those working together. What we've been doing at the IDA is just taking projects directly on a case-by-case basis, and have approved a couple of affordable housing projects in the last year.
Great. Thank you so much for this information. In addition, you weren't expecting to give us information on, so thank you, Heather. Thank you, Martha. So moving on quickly, do committee members have any reports for any liaison or any HED related topics? Martha?
Yeah, I do. Just speaking of inclusionary zoning, I want to thank David West for sending me a bunch of information. The town of Dryden is redoing its comprehensive plan and looking at rezoning the hamlet of Varna. And this has come up, and they have not previously looked at inclusionary zoning. So I really appreciate David sending those resources, and we'll try to get that pushed through, see if we can make some progress there.
Wonderful. That's great news. I have one update. I'm the DIA liaison, Downtown Ithaca Alliance liaison to HED. Just a quick updates. They did receive a PPP loan of $110,000. They have looked through their budget. Their budget is about $1.2 million annually. They, because of COVID, lost about $200,000, but they were able to do adjustments in their expenditures, reduction in programs, some services, and they've been able to balance their budget for the year, which is great news. They have been focusing heavily on marketing and support for downtown businesses that have been hit really hard by COVID. There are currently 18 vacant storefronts in the business improvement district, larger than there has been in quite a while, partly due, obviously, or to a large extent due to COVID. And they're continuing to track the impact on our downtown businesses. So the one big thing that I would say is the transition, a lot of the businesses downtown have transitioned to also offering online their products and services online. If people want to support local, I highly encourage going to the downtown, the DIA website, looking for those businesses and supporting local as much as possible. So just my shout out for all the work that they're doing and an update of the impact that COVID's having on our community and our businesses. That is my only member report. County Administrator, I see Amy Hendricks is here.
Anna, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So did any stores go out or empty out or go out of business in downtown?
It seems that there are some that will be closing permanently. I don't have a list. I've asked for that list. But it seems that some of them have or will be, are making that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, everyone. I don't have a report for you today. I continue to be up at the Emergency Operations Center. I know you're going to be hearing more from the COC and their strategic plan, so as well as many other presentations. So no report today.
Great. Thank you, Amy. From Planning and Sustainability Department, Commissioner of Planning and Sustainability Report, Katie Borgella, our Commissioner. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everybody. Good to see folks. My only item to report that isn't going to be covered in other parts of this agenda is that our own Megan was able to present on the Community Housing Development Fund to the City of Hudson's Common Council at the beginning of July. She was invited because they had heard about our housing fund and the great work that we've been doing. She said it was a really engaging conversation, and she was particularly struck by how great it is to have our strong partners, our legislative support, our staff support, really engaged on this topic and thinking creatively on how to solve these problems. And they were very interested in all that she had to share. So that's my only update for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that it would be really, it's good to have this conversation. This type of investment and initiative is rare and specifically focused on affordable housing. And it is an initiative by a collaboration of Cornell University, City of Ithaca County, and now the town of Dryden has joined in. And very innovative, 10 years. So anniversary of, thank you to Katie, and I know David works on it very closely, and Megan as well. So thank you. Martha has been the chair of this committee for how long?
I guess Pam McAsee was the first chair, so when she left the ledge, so 5 or 6 years, I guess.
Thank you, Martha. You've done a great job on that committee. So one other thing I forgot to say about the DIA that people may not know, thank you to Mike Sigler. I wanted to do a shout out because he worked with the DIA to help them get into the health consortium. And we voted in the DIA to make that happen. So thank you, Mike, for working with them.
No problem. You know, they had taxing authority, so it was nice to be able to do that for them. So
that was wonderful. Well, it was very appreciated. So moving on to a report out from the Southern.
Anna?
Yes.
Hand up.
Oh, it's hard to see, Henry. Yes.
Okay. I wanted to ask Katie whether she's going back to the EOC, whether she's staying in office.
I am mostly working remotely still, so I am in my den right now, but I still am working for the EOC. It's a mix. I think we all have been making more time to do our regular jobs as the numbers have been lower around here, but it's kind of picking up again. We're going to have a time where we're all going to be working, reaching out to the different department heads to find out how things are going, how we can support them. So I think that that's important. I've been working closely with higher education on some of the outreach efforts they've been doing. So it's a mix still, but I would say that I'm doing a lot more of my regular commissioner job than I was in the spring. And Megan and I are still coordinating very closely so that if I need to be pulled into the EOC for more hours, she's able to step in and keep things running smoothly in my absence.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And if everybody could use the raising of hands, that would be a lot easier. I have that open now to make sure that I definitely see your hand raising. And I see Joan is here to give us Southern Tier 8 membership. I think, Joan, you're the lead on that report. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I was muted. Sorry, that was my fault. Yes. So what you have in your agenda package is a preliminary report, just kind of a status of where we are right now in that review. So sharing it with you now to just let you know where we are, but also to get any feedback to see if there's any additional information or type of information you'd like us to pursue in order to understand our membership in Southern Tier 8 and to make a determination on whether to continue that membership. We rejoined the organization a couple of years ago, and the legislature said we want to do a 3-year trial. That trial ends at the end of this year, but in order to make a budget decision, obviously the budget for next year is determined before the end of the year. So we're trying to get you the information that we think would be helpful in making that determination of whether or not to continue our membership in Southern Tier 8. Just a couple of things I just want to touch on before I just open it up for questions. One is the county, as a result of its membership, has 3 voting seats on the board of directors. Right now, those are Katie as Commissioner of Planning, Heather McDaniel from TCAD, and Anna, you're representing the legislature. So we do have 3 voting seats on the board. The cash contributions we give, our membership dues are $10,000 a year. And those are paid up through this year. They are not in, again, this is the end of the 3-year trial membership. In addition to our dues, the county contributes in another way, which is we provide documentation to Southern Tier 8 for the activities we do that might reasonably be considered things that they would do if we did not exist. They use that to match federal grant funds that they get, and that's a 1-to-1. So for every dollar of documentation we provide to them, they get $1. I'm not quite sure how that all works, but I'm just going to say they do benefit greatly from our participation in that way. And that's one reason why our dues are lower than sort of they are in other similar organizations. The only downside to that from our perspective, and it has not been an issue yet, is that time that we document as supporting Southern Tier 8, we cannot use that to match other federal grants. So we don't get to double count that. We don't get a lot of federal grants, so it's not an issue, but just thought I should mention that in case it ever comes up. If we ever need that to document that, we'd have to make a choice. So one of the primary reasons I believe that we joined originally or rejoined originally was because it opened up grant opportunities, not for the county so much, but for organizations within the county. In the memo that I provided, there's a table that documents 5 separate grants that have been received by organizations in Tompkins County, totaling just short of $1 million in grant funds. Southern Tier 8 recently did a calculation of return, what they called return on investment. So how much each county got returned for their every dollar of dues they paid. And for Tompkins County, that was $27 in grant funds for every dollar in dues paid. That was about the middle of where other counties got. So we weren't particularly high or particularly low, but we were pretty much right smack dab in the middle of the 8 counties. The other thing I do want to touch on is we originally thought the participation in Southern Tier 8 would allow us to, would open up the county for grants from the economic, the federal economic development administration. It turns out the county really doesn't meet the eligibility requirements either to join the district. Because, you know, quite frankly, we're better off financially, fiscally than other parts of the country are. So, and that's measured by unemployment rate and per capita income, and we really don't even come close to those standards. So it's not like we will soon be on the cusp of meeting those standards. One thing I do want to mention that's not mentioned in the memo is that membership, though, is open to communities individually that meet those standards. So we checked in the city of Ithaca. So in theory could, it does not at the moment, but that's something to keep an eye on. So they might be able to be either join the district or at least be eligible for EDA grant funds. And I think most people know we do have 2 small census tracts that are eligible for EDA funds, again, because they have individually met those criteria. So again, it's not the county or nothing, it's any sort of subset of the county. So again, something we'll want to keep an eye on, but it seems unlikely the county would meet those standards anytime in the foreseeable future. That's really all I have to say at this point. I've spoken with Jen Gregory at Southern Tier 8. She'd be happy to meet with you at your next meeting or whenever it's convenient to talk about what her organization does if you have questions. So I'll put that question out there, but also see if there's anything else you want me to dig into in terms of determining whether we should be continuing our membership or not.
And Martha has a question. Before opening up, I just wanted to give an additional thing that is going on with SD8. They are our representatives in the region at a national effort for reopening and returning to work. And that is a nationwide initiative to help create programs and supports for people reentering from jails and prisons. ST8 is the regional representative, and there's a team that is on ST8's team, and I am a member of that. So we have representation, we have meetings nationally and regionally, sharing ideas and resources and information. So there's also some engagement in that arena that we have with our ST8 connections. So Martha?
Thanks, Joan, for this report. Is it 3 years already? That doesn't sound, I can't believe it.
It's, they actually allowed us to start participating before we technically joined. So it's almost exactly 3 years since we started participating. It's been 2.5.
Like the first year, okay. I would, so the interesting about the EDA and the municipalities, you mentioned the census tracts that are eligible. Is that the opportunity zones or the same census tract as the opportunity zones?
Yes, and that's how they became opportunity zones, because they met those criteria, the same criteria apply. So it's not one or the, you know, so if you're eligible for one, you're eligible for the other.
Do you have any idea whether the dues are going to go up in this coming year?
In this coming year, no, I did ask Jen that question because for budgetary purposes, I needed to know if we were, I always checked to see if dues were going to be increasing. He said they had considered that for next year, but when the pandemic hit, they kind of decided it was not the right time. But she was honest and said, you know, in the next 2, maybe 3 years, they may be asking for an increase. So it didn't, you know, so I think we can anticipate a request in the future, but there isn't one for next year.
All right, and I would also mention that sort of an intangible benefit has been our influence with respect to energy issues. I know Katie has carried our sort of non-pipe alternative philosophy to Oneonta. They meet in Oneonta, right? She's in Oneonta. So to the group, and I think it's really been influential and really important and part of influencing others in our region, others around us on that kind of thinking. So I think there are intangible benefits to being a member, and certainly if you're looking at the bang for the buck, it's even if the membership goes up a little bit, it's still a very good deal, it seems to me. So thanks.
Thanks. Annie?
Thank you. So Joan, thanks for the presentation. So reading it over and listening to you, it sounds to me as if, so it's 10,000 every year, and we've paid that for 3 years, if I'm seeing that correctly, and the county and other municipality are some of our municipalities within our county and agencies have been able to garner almost $1 million in grants. So if I'm seeing that correctly, to me, then it looks like a no-brainer. So if I have those things correct.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Wonderful. Yes, it has been, I would say another intangible is connections with leadership in other counties, in other member counties. It keeps us from being in a bubble, and we talk a lot about collaborative efforts. We share information, we share ideas about programs, but also hearing about the stresses in other counties. And I've found that personally very useful. I don't know, Katie, if you have also, Megan, no, I'm sorry, Heather also.
Yeah, well, I also just wanted to add that this will be coming to you in the fall as an over target request for the $10,000 a year, bringing that into our target budget. So we wanted to make sure that you had the information you need to make that decision. In terms of intangible, I agree. I will say I entered this somewhat skeptically because we had not been a partner for so long, and I definitely see value in participating. I think Jen Gregory and her team have done a tremendous job of supporting our local businesses and, nonprofits primarily, and helping them think through great grant applications, which you see in the almost $1 million of funding they've received. So I do think it's worth our time and investment.
Yeah, she's definitely one of the most dedicated and empathic people I've met in a long time. So it's wonderful to work with her. I see Heather has a comment as well. Question?
I just wanted to add that one of the other big things that the ST8 has been working on is broadband and trying to bring funding in to do regional broadband initiatives. So that has been tremendously helpful in some of our planning here around broadband. And my team at TCAD took the lead and did apply for an ARC Power grant to bring in broadband into Lansing to serve redevelopment of the site of the old power plant in Lansing. So that could be a real big benefit to our community moving forward.
Thank you so much, Heather. In interest of time, I want to move on, but I think that we've certainly made the review and the case for incredible benefits for our $10,000 membership annually. So I, for one, certainly am in support of this going into Target. If anyone else has any budgetary questions, of course, we can continue that conversation when we get into the EBC, extended budget committee meetings, as long as it stays focused on this as a budgetary impact. But hopefully this will provide good information, given that it's recorded, for our colleagues to see the review of the ST8 membership. So thank you, everyone. Moving on to tourism. Resolution designation of tourism promotion agency for state ID 9433. Can I have someone move that? Martha, Mike seconds, and I see Nick. I saw your head for oh, there you are. Do you want to give us a summary of this?
Sure thing. Thanks, and good morning, everybody. So this resolution is for the designation of our tourism promotion agency. Let me pull it up just one second. This is a resolution we do annually to officially, as a county, designate entity as our tourism promotion agency for the purposes of the state of New York's tourism matching grants program. This is a program that allows for us to really leverage some state funding to do marketing and promotion for tourism. So as we have in over, I believe as we have in the last years, we're designating the Ithaca Tompkins County Convention Visitors Bureau as the official tourism promotion agency. We currently already have them under contract for we're in the middle of a 5-year agreement with them. This is on recommendation of the STPB. So happy to answer any other questions committee might have.
Anyone have any questions? Henry and I are both on the STPB, so we've had an opportunity to look at this a little further for longer. But if Annie, Mike, or Martha have any questions? Great. So I'm going to do a roll call. Martha?
Yeah.
Mike?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
And myself as well. That is unanimous. Thank you, Nick. So moving into the larger report, tourism program June and July updates. Nick, if you want to start, and I wanted to acknowledge that we have Josh Friedman here. Last month, we talked about the impact of COVID on all of the organizations that receive funding through room tax. And there was a particular focus on our ACOD, arts and culture organizations. Of all the grants, just a reminder, all the grants from room tax or from the tourism, strategic tourism program have been suspended this year, except for arts and culture, the ACOD grants that went through earlier this year. They have received some cuts as we have seen significant reductions in our room tax collection. I'll let Nick talk about that further. But last month we directed STPB, and Josh volunteered. Thank you so very much, Josh, to do a deep dive interview with all of the organizations that typically receive funding through the strategic tourism program. And that includes the arts and culture organizations to evaluate the fiscal health of those organizations moving forward. So up to now and then moving forward. So I'll let him present that, but Nick, I'll let you open up with the June and July reports.
Sure, thank you. So yeah, the June and July report update is included in your packet. One thing to lead off on, there was a request at the last meeting to get a better understanding of the financial situation of the room tax account. So that's right up front here. So as of July 8, which was when we ran the numbers through the accounting system, we had paid out just over $1.1 million to contracted partners. In addition, $117,000 has been allocated to internal accounts, things such as my payroll, other departments within the county. So if you tally that all up, and it's just over $1.2 million that's been spent year to date. The next question is, of course, how much have we pulled in? This is actually, it's not uncommon for us to be a little upside down this time of year. The first and second quarters are lower historically for us in terms of room tax collection. Not this low, of course. Room tax collection in the second quarter was 113,248, which is, a far cry from what we had projected in our 2020 budget of $773,000. However, in the silver linings department, it is actually pretty close to our modified budget that we developed back in March of which was forecasting $126,000. So the good news is we're on pace for our modified forecast. We're just going to have to continue to monitor this very closely as numbers come in for the third and fourth quarter. And that really is something that we'll be looking at as data comes in. That's if we do see a decline that's sharper or is out of alignment with our forecast, we will have to make some hard decisions about our fourth quarter room tax payment. So we're asking that all contracted partners through the tourism program be prepared for their fourth quarter payments to be withheld until the full year's room tax is collected. That's just an advisory at this point. We're going to make a decision on that as the third quarter room tax collections come in. Delinquent tax payments continue to be an issue. We have had some pickups since the first quarter when we had 10 hotels that did not remit taxes. That number is shrunk down to 3 for the first quarter. However, there was 7 hotels that did not remit for the second quarter. So the finance department is in contact with those properties to secure a payment. And just to be clear, the second quarter, which covered March, April, and May, while there were some properties, some hotels that closed temporarily during that, all hotels were open as of March 1st and for the first 2 to 3 weeks of March. So there's no reason to expect that they would have $0 in room occupancy tax during that full period. Okay, the CVB prepared and submitted its mid-year report to STPB. You can use that link in the memo to read through it. They are also in a tag along to the resolution we just discussed. They're having some potential challenges here going forward with I Love New York and the tourism funding that they use for the matching grants. That appears to be at risk here in 2020. So we're not exactly sure where that's going to land. We're monitoring that closely. And then we'll come back to the survey in just a minute. We're still working on our 2021 budget. We expect to have that ready for STPB to review at its August meeting. And then all the tables in this memo have been updated as well to reflect current payment amounts and current room tax amounts. So happy to answer any questions about the report before we dive into the topic of our survey.
Annie?
Thanks for the report, Nick. So I had heard from one constituent that they had a family member trying to find a hotel room, and they said the hotels were full, and that just didn't make, or they had trouble finding a hotel room, so that just didn't make sense to me. So I thought, are some of the hotels closed down, or is there something going on? So do you have any information on that?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the day and of the week that they may have been looking for, it's possible there were occupancy constraints. We have a couple factors. Yeah, some hotels are temporarily closed and will remain so for probably several more weeks or months. We are hearing that weekend occupancy is picking up, and that some hotels are doing relatively steady business. on the weekends. And that certainly is something that we're keeping a close eye on here as things are changing in our economy. But weekday occupancy continues to be very, very low from the reports we're hearing. So no, you shouldn't have any difficulty finding hotel rooms, Sunday through Thursday. That's from what the reports we gather.
I heard from the DIA that actually there was full occupancy for several weekends for the downtown hotels.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was during the weekend, Annie, then that would have been the case. With the uptick that we are seeing in COVID locally, we'll see what continues and with the surges around the country. So, but for a couple of weeks, it was at least on the weekend. Henry.
Yes, Nick, I know that Cornell allegedly is supposed to be holding hotel rooms for the fall for their move-in, but I assume they would not be subject to occupancy tax?
That's my understanding as well, that the rooms that Cornell is looking at for move-in and other purposes, as they ramp up their reactivation here for the fall, would all be tax exempt. That's my understanding at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Martha?
Yeah, back to the data from the first quarter, that was all pre-COVID, right, Nick? So
That's correct. Yeah, the first quarter is December, January, and February. That's tax.
So the hotels would have had no reason, and they collected that tax from the people who stayed there. So there should have been no reason that there was any delinquency at all.
The only reason is just a business cash flow decision, which is not legal necessarily, but it's given the circumstances that many of these businesses were in, it's certainly something that I can at least sympathize with the challenges they were going through.
Well, and the taxes were due mid-March, so.
Yeah, the deadline was March 20th for the remittance of tax. So that was pretty much
a bad time.
Bad time. Yeah, exactly. Oh.
Martha, you're muted.
No, I'm not, according to me.
Now we can hear you.
All right, I'm gonna go off video in case that's part of the problem. No, I understand the cash flow problems. I totally. Do you happen to know whether the hotels applied for PPP, payroll protection funds?
My understanding from conversations with CVB is that every business that was eligible for it locally has applied. That was the majority of hotels have applied. Whether they've received it or not at this stage, I'm not sure. But
and do you know whether we have very low case numbers right now, but do you know whether there are any people in isolation on any of those hotels? I wouldn't expect would be a big number of room nights taken up, but it's not impossible.
I don't know that in fact, I'm not sure if there's been any. And then my understanding of the use of isolation for hotels is that it's actually a relatively complex arrangement with the hotels that only like large institutional buyers such as a university or a local government could make an arrangement with.
Right, but this is one of those questions I've had and never gotten really an answer. Maybe Katie, you can help on this, if not now, but later. If someone has to isolation and they can't do it in their home, is there anything that we do? Does the county do anything? Does the county help provide housing? And that seems like the hotels are an option. I don't know.
I honestly think that's more of a public health question, but I can certainly look into it and get back to you with that.
Okay, thanks. And obviously we'd be tax exempt too, but at least the rooms would be used. All right, thanks very much.
Great. I want to move now to Josh's report in the interest of time. I know, Josh, you've put a lot into this, so I would love to hear what you found.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
I don't know. Keep talking and we'll let you
Oh,
know.
okay. Testing 1, 2.
It's a bit choppy.
Okay. Let me.
Is that better?
Much better.
Yes.
And now we can't hear you again.
Now, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I'm going to, I apologize for the moon. My internet connection is not stable and I don't know how to change the moon. But I'm going to try to share my screen and zip over to a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to go very quickly through this. Okay, can you see my screen? Yes. Is that a yes? Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to go quickly through this and I'll give you a copy of this. There's a lot of text on this presentation and I'm not going to read all of it. So I'll give you a copy afterwards. We did a survey. It was developed in conjunction with Megan at CAP and Nick and members of the funders group, which includes the several of the foundations in town. The survey was emailed out to Tompkins County arts organizations, which included Community Arts Partnerships mailing list, as well as Strategic Tourism and Planning Board award recipients for the last 3 years and our nonprofit.
Josh, we've lost you again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
we could hear you before, just to let you know.
Okay.
Oh, I don't know
Right,
why.
great. It might be better with the video off now. The survey addressed what organizations are currently doing and how they've adapted. It asked a number of questions along the lines of what kind of collaboration they're doing and mission impact, and also financial questions and what plans they have related to the pandemic and the next 3 to 9 months. It was designed as a fairly general ask to get a feeling from the from this industry. The survey was emailed out on mid-July and we received, that says 34, I'm sorry, it's actually 32 responses. And we have not yet received responses from several of the ACOT awardees at this time. I think we are missing about 6 of 5 or 6 ACOT awardees. So we're gonna, there was a very little amount of time. People are on vacation and things like that. So we're going to want to keep soliciting and getting the rest of these responses. Nevertheless, I think this gives us a nice snapshot to look at where we are, where we might be going. Here's a list of the organizations that did respond. You can see it's a pretty wide range of organizations, and you'll have a chance to look at that later when I send it to you. I want to note that Dan Smalls Presents did respond to the survey. As you know, Dan Smalls Presents is a for-profit business, a promoter. He works with both the State Theater and the Hangar Theater in town, as well as several for-profit bars and restaurants to book arts in there. I did remove Dan Smalls' results from this survey because of their commercial status. But I want to touch a little bit on the impact as we in a moment. If we look at the organizations that responded, the budget size of the organizations is shown here. We had 4 of our largest organizations from the 1 to 3 million mark, 3 in the $500,000 to 1 million, and the majority of our organizations are in the 150 to 500,000 mid-size organizations. Most of our organizations right now are delivering services either live or virtual, and many of them are doing both. So that's a good thing. 6 of our 31 organizations report that they are hibernating or temporarily closed at this point. Again, that's of those organizations reported, and it will be interesting to see when we add the rest of the organizations in here. Lost revenue. This is a big issue here. Most organizations report lost revenue in both their earned and contributed income. Together, these 31 respondents project a reduction in total revenue of over $3,164,000. They also project to cut $2,717,000 in spending in order to get through this year. It's important to realize that a lot of that spending is labor and spent on gig workers, our local artists that work in town, our technicians, and our craftsmen and artisans. You'll notice that there's a big difference between the total revenue lost, total revenue not coming in, and the projections of what they were able to cut, leaving a deficit. The overall loss in tourism and related tourism spending based on these numbers is likely to exceed $30 million if we look at a simple calculation of about 10 times the amount of money that we spend on tourism will come back to us. Okay, and I just want to make sure everybody's still hearing me. Just one person responds would be great.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, great. Revenue trends. Several organizations reported getting PPP and EIDL funds, which help their revenue for this year. That's really important as we start looking into how they're going to get by next year. The larger organizations, the larger the impact. The Chamber of Commerce and CVB, for example, in the $1 to $3 million category, expects a loss of $700,000 in revenue. Other large organizations like the Science Center are projecting a loss of $600,000 in revenue, while our mid-sized organizations like the Ithaca Children's Garden is projecting a loss of $148,000, and Cuba Chamber Orchestra projects a loss of $100,000. Many organizations noted the loss of the Strategic Tourism Planning Board grant funding as well. This is where I want to just talk for a moment. Dan Smalls presents, he is presenting a loss of $4.5 million in gross revenue. I'm not sure exactly where all of that is coming from, but that amount of ticket sales, that's not, I don't think that's uncommon for him in a given year in this community. And the related spending loss on that is huge for restaurants and hotels and other folks in town. Keep that in mind, even though they're not for profit. We asked the organizations what steps they've taken so far to shore up their financial situation. You can take a look at this. 19 organizations accessed PPP funding, 7 accessed EIDL funding. 13 organizations have said that they've tapped into their reserves. And you can see the furlough employees and hey, looking at this is scary for me because this is all temporary funding that these organizations got, and as we know, this funding is running out. On the other side of this chart, laying off employees, cutting employee pay, tapping reserves, and what is listed here as other, which we're not sure about, are not sustainable ways for these organizations to go forward. They're doing the right thing in the short term, but these organizations are going to need to restructure in the long run in order to continue their mission, given given that they will continue to that they would likely need to continue saving money. Lost jobs, 15 organizations are reported furloughing or laying off employees. Only one organization right now expects to bring back its entire staff in the next 3 to 9 months. 4 organizations said yes, some, but 10 report not sure or no. And as I said before, on top of this, many of these organizations, not just Dan Smalls, but many of these other organizations just never hired the gig workers that they normally would. So the numbers of employees that we're seeing furloughed and laying off is just the tip of the iceberg as far as the amount of people that have not gotten paid that normally would get paid in this industry. Looking forward, we asked, do you expect to be operating in the next 3 to 9 months? Good news is 27 organizations reported yes, while only 4 organizations reported not sure. Of the 4 that reported not sure, all of those are in our smallest budget group in the $0 to $50,000 range, and those organizations are listed below. Some takeaways. And this is a little bit more of me putting my consultant hat on here. The majority of these organizations seem to be holding steady for the moment, and I think that's the important part. As I said, we haven't gotten all of our responses, and I expect that some of the organizations who have not responded may not be doing as well. The future is quite uncertain, as are plans on how to move forward. I think when organizations are saying they don't know what they're going to do, these organizations don't really know how to plan. They're not able to plan, just like all of us are feeling it's real hard to put a budget together right now. We asked organizations about collaborating, and the organizations that have been collaborators and are good collaborators, like the Chamber and the Children's Garden and Cinemapolis, they're continuing to look for partnership opportunities. This is something that the funders group is particularly interested in, and I think we should be interested in as well, in that collaboration may be the key moving forward. Many organizations are also looking to align programming to assure equitable access to a wide variety of populations, and are currently working on racial equity and social justice issues. I think this is important because this is such an important topic right now in our country, that we know that these organizations are still working, they're still doing what they can, and they are focusing on these critical issues. As I mentioned before, that gap between the lost revenue and the expense cuts, the only way these organizations are going to make that gap up is going to be from reserves, creating new debt, and juggling cash flow around that new debt. In just this group of 31 organizations, not including Dan Smalls, the deficit is close to $500,000, $450,000. And that number's, we're going to see that number go up as more organizations get into this survey. Again, the large organizations and the small organizations are a little more able to manage drops in income better than the mid-sized organizations. Just think in terms of an organization like the Children's Garden, with a budget of, I think their budget is about $350,000, and they're losing $150,000 in revenue this year, as opposed to an organization like the Science Center with a budget close to $3 million, needing to cut $600,000. It's a much more difficult situation for these small organizations, and they don't have a lot to cut that's not going to cut into their ability to run and to stay open. A few thoughts. This crisis is not here yet for the arts industries, but it's likely that some of these organizations will not survive the next 12 months, depending upon how strong their financial situation was going in. Planning is going to be essential, and expertise in mission-based strategic planning coupled with financial planning is what's going to help these organizations weather this storm. Funding streams will change going forward. Right now, foundations are looking okay as long as the market doesn't tank. Most foundations work on a 3-year rolling average. as far as their funding. But funding like tourism grants, state grants, marketing matches, I am projecting that we're going to see significant cuts, and some of these may disappear altogether, and this will take 3 to 4 years to rebound. Individual giving will be hard hit, although I will note that some of these organizations are doing quite well with individual giving right now. But as the need for social services and food security ramp up, the arts and cultural sector will see a shrinking piece of the pie. I believe this is true because we saw the same thing happen in 2009, 2010. Additionally, it's going to get harder to fundraise without this in-person engagement that many of these organizations rely on. Collaboration, in-kind services, mergers, and partnerships between nonprofits and government agencies are going to be more important for the sustainability for everyone. I'm glad that the Community Foundation and the other funders are asking about collaboration. Some of these organizations may need to combine or merge in order to sustain. It's possible that shifting to online delivery can have some positive incomes for some of these organizations. Especially when we get to mission impact. They can have some great positive impact, but it is very unlikely that earned revenue is going to be made up by switching things to online. And lastly, the Strategic Tourism Planning Board, I think we are grateful that the funder group is also concerned with this, and we need to stay up to date on how that group wants to use this data. A few recommendations that the tourism board stays in contact with our current awardees and we monitor their fiscal health. I think we should be asking for profit and loss statements and balance sheets probably twice a year with any kind of payments that are going out, so we can monitor these organizations and make sure that we're not sinking our scarce resources into an organization that might be paying off old debt and shutting down or something of that nature. But mostly we need to pay attention to these so that we can figure out what we can do or who we can provide help to. Letting our cultural and tourism groups know that we will help find volunteer resources if they feel like they're in need of help to manage through this crisis. So this was something I was talking with Katie about. And Anna, that there's a possibility that we might be able to look at some of our resources that we have on the in state government to help organizations and or try to hook organizations up with financial consulting. And lastly, the legislature, I hope, will push for national and state relief packages that include help for arts and tourism industry, recognizing the huge role that this plays in our county. The last two slides I'm going to let you read on your own. This is some good work. Please read through these. These were just some of the comments that we received, which really shows us that our mission-based work is continuing, and that's really important by these organizations, and that this industry is resilient, and the people in this industry are going to give everything they can to keep things moving. So that's it. I will send this to somebody to deliver to you. I'll send it to Nick and he can send it out. I believe that Nick is also preparing more of a survey, more of a summary of the nonprofit survey where you can see the specific questions and specific results. I'm going to stop talking. Questions?
Thank you, Josh. Before we begin, is it possible to stop sharing your screen so that we can see each other?
Yes.
You can always bring it back up if need be.
Yes.
I'm sure there are a lot of questions, so I'm going to let people dive in. Martha?
Yeah, thanks very much, Josh. This is really, really helpful information. I would point out that the when we certainly are trying to lobby the federal government, one of the calculations that's under consideration for state and local aid is lost revenue. So not just for the feds to reimburse us for COVID expenses, but lost revenue. And we made the pitch with Tom Reed that revenue calculation had to include tourism funding. And he assured me that it did. I think there's probably a good chance that if in fact local governments get any federal aid, that it will include tourism funding, because tourism income, because there's, I mean, every community in the country has, you know, basically has a tourism sector. I'm glad you mentioned mergers. This is something that certainly happens in the nonprofit world, or the human service world. And it's one of the things that perennially comes up. How come we have so many organizations? So, you know, I think it's a time when people really have to think outside the box. So I hope that's something that can be considered. And I don't know if there's a role here that the county can play in fiscal analysis that goes into those kinds of mergers, but it's something I hope that folks can consider. So thanks.
Thanks, Martha. Before we move on, do we have the list of the ACOT organizations that did not yet fill out the survey?
I can
Thank you.
pull that together in like 2 minutes if you.
I think I did it already. It's well, the State Theater, although we did get Dan Small's numbers, clearly the financial numbers that Dan gave us were not the State Theater's numbers. I did have some conversations with Doug, the executive director, a couple weeks ago, and they said that they were in okay shape right now this year. But we need to talk to him. I think he's on vacation right now. We need to get them to send us their information and numbers. We have not heard from the Hangar Theater. We did not hear from Community School of Music and Arts. And while Ithaca Shakespeare Festival is not on our list this year as an awardee, they are on our 3-year list, and we have not heard from them. I think that was everybody for ACOT. No, I'm sorry. Trumansburg Conservatory, I think, as well.
And the Hangar Theater has been doing, of all the organizations, has been doing significant events, classes online that I have seen. I've been announcing those as well. So I'm very curious to hear what their status is.
Yeah, they have. I've had some unofficial conversations with people at the Hangar. I know they didn't have time to do the survey yet. I talked to their board president and asked them to please do it. They seem to think that they're okay through December at this point. You know, this is an important thing to keep in mind. Organizations like the Hangar and the Kitchen and maybe the state a little bit that have subscriptions, and anybody who took in money ahead of time, they let me just use the Hangar for example. The Hangar Theater is producing a season. They're doing it on the cheap. The Actors Association has let them use actors for free. This never happens, but because of the situation, they took subscription money in early. They're not producing shows and building scenery. So they probably, and I don't know this for sure, but they probably have netted more on their season this year than they normally would because their expenses are down. But no one's going to buy a subscription for next summer. And normally the Hangar spends the subscription money for next summer to get through January, February, and March. Those are the cash flow problems. So if no one will buy for next summer, and if they do buy, they're only buying at this point with a guarantee to get that money back. No one was going to ask for their money back from the CCO last year, but they're not going to give them their money next year if they don't think that there's going to be programming. So this is where we're going to see a lag behind what's happening.
Thank you, Josh. That was very helpful. Henry?
Yes, Josh, thank you for the report. Did I miss, did you give a percentage of the response rate?
I did not. No, I'm sorry. This survey actually our responses came in on Monday, and we just had a chance to really go through this. Although Nick, you may have that. I know you did some work.
Actually, that's a good question. I'd have to go back to the distribution list. I can't say offhand how many organizations were contacted. We had there were two lists. One was our list of organizations that had received funding through the tourism program, and the other one was CAP, and they have a list of organizations they've supported. There's a fair bit of overlap, so we, cut out people didn't get, hit with the same request twice. But I don't know the total number. I can follow up and find out.
Yeah, and Henry, I think the next step for us is that we need to hound these organizations that did not respond yet, and make sure we get their responses. And we'll add it to these numbers.
So we can do this report multiple months in a row and see how it's changing as we get more information. I think that it's worth it.
Yeah.
Henry, if that would be of help.
Yes, that would be of help. Thanks.
Yeah, I would like to see that too, Josh, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, Nick, I think we'll speak with Megan and we'll push these organizations to respond, and we can add those responses. That'll be easy.
I might only caution, it'd be good to get a full or as close to a full response as we can during this period, and then maybe let 2 to 3 weeks pass before we do another push.
Yeah.
So that we don't bleed over too much in the timing. But yeah, certainly it might be something we could have ready for a September HED meeting.
Mm-hmm. And a question as far as you mentioned the deficit across all organizations being about 450,000.
Yep.
And I was curious, one of your recommendations was volunteering time to help organizations seek community funding or grant funding. Can you talk a little bit more about your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that as a member of Strategic Tourism Planning Board, and I'm both the chair of Planning and Evaluation and the co-chair of the Budget Committee, I feel pretty confident that we don't have a lot of money to start, to put a new grant program together. But what we might have between the Strategic Tourism Planning Board, between the funders group, and between the legislature and the county government is we have experts, and we can help these organizations. I believe, back in 2010, about a year and a half after the economic collapse, we lost 10,000 mid-sized arts organizations in this country. The larger organizations were able to get by. At the time, I remember I was working for an organization. We had about an $8 million budget, and we had to cut about $1 million of that. That was painful, but it's very different than working for an organization that has a $1 million budget and has to cut $200,000 out of that. Because what happens in that small organization is you're cutting the executive director, or you're cutting their pay, or you're cutting all of their assistants, or you're cutting their fundraising ability, or you're cutting their marketing ability, and you're cutting their ability to do mission work. Where the larger organization, if you have a $6 million budget, you figure out how to prioritize your mission and what the most important things are. And maybe you're not going to build, maybe the Science Center is not going to build 3 new exhibits next year. Maybe they're going to build 1, maybe they're not going to build any. Maybe they're going to combine with 3 other science centers around the country, and they're each going to build 1, and they can still go forward. It's going to be the children's gardens and the running to places that really have more of a problem. And we may find that some of those are the organizations that are going to shut down. So back to your question. So how do we help these organizations out? We may not be able to help them from shutting down. We can try. We can try to direct them to the right resources. We can try to help them with financial questions and how to maybe take some of the short-term debt and turn it into long-term debt. And we can do that through some counseling and working with their board. If necessary, we might be able to help a board of directors save pay off some debt, save some resources, maybe save the organization's furniture and fixtures and equipment, and maybe open back up again. Maybe it has to be mothballed. We may find that some of these organizations just can't effectively accomplish their mission in a virtual way, and they say, okay, we can't do this. We may find that an organization like the Hangar, which is doing virtual programming this year because it's inexpensive for them to do, they already had money from people, they don't want to give that money back, so they got to do something, right? You know, but it'll be a different story next year. So I think that through consulting and through help with maybe working with banks, we can help these organizations. Let's face it, most of these organizations are going to have short-term debt, and it will be up to the banks and the board members that have given them that short-term debt to decide how long they're going to let that go.
Josh, I really appreciate it. I see, Martha, you have one other question. We have 25 minutes left of the meeting and 3 more topics to cover. If you can wait, we'll bring this conversation back next month, but if it's a small
2
question.
sentences. Look, I think the point about mergers is really, what matters is that the functions and the programs exist. The sort of struggle to maintain independent infrastructure is not, I think, the main point from the community's point of view. And I mean, the Human Services Coalition might be a model here. They've gone through organizations folding, growing, shifting as the need comes up. So, and I see Kathy's on the call, so maybe that's, folks should talk to each other. And what's important is that the functions remain, not necessarily independent structures.
Thank you, Martha. And Katie, I wanted to give you the last word. I know we have spoken about this as well with Nick and Josh about taking an advisory role and support role, consulting role, capacity with some of these organizations. And I wanted to just check to see if you had any last thoughts or words to add to that.
Yeah, I think that's something that there is interest. We'd probably bring it to STPB, but there's interest in providing that kind of help to organizations that might be desiring that help. Just talking to Josh and his thoughts on dealing with your lender at the bank and how to structure things moving forward to weather the storm, I think would be helpful to a lot of the smaller and even mid-sized organizations. And obviously Nick has a lot of expertise to bring to it as well. And just the STPB is a great source of information and expertise. So I think we will be kind of fleshing out that idea and trying to move that forward in the interim.
So that can be brought to the STPB after being fleshed out and then brought back to HED hopefully next month when we update this report next month. Is that possible?
I would look to Nick to answer that question in terms of timing of meetings and that kind of thing.
Yeah, we can certainly raise the topic at the August STPB.
Great.
And we'll begin digging into where we go from here.
Thank you, Nick. Quickly, Kathy Schlather, I see you had your hand up.
Yeah, hi folks. I just wanted to just as this conversation is going on, the Human Service Coalition organizations, we got funding from the group of funders, about $40-some thousand, and we have been matching consultants with organizations, including arts organizations, to look at how they can survive organizationally for the next 12 to 18 months. So we were able to do about 25 agencies with what we had, and the funders are interested in if there's a bigger demand in looking at meeting that demand. So we started our matching. We put out about 3 weeks ago. We had immediate response from organizations, and we're starting to match organizations to consultants now. So that, I just wanted to let you know about that.
Well, if we can help communicate that and get the word out, please let us know.
Sure.
Great. I really want to move on, but Heather, I see you if you have one last little bit to add.
I can be brief. The Small Business Development Center, the SBDC, has an advisor here in Ithaca, and they're based out of Binghamton. They just hired 4 more emergency advisors to provide exactly that kind of assistance to companies. They will provide that kind of resource for not-for-profit organizations. The SBDCs doesn't have any fees or anything, so that's a great resource for them to be looking at as well.
Great. Thank you, Heather. We will continue this conversation probably for the rest of the year as we track. Very important. I see Dan Klein is on this. He's a fellow legislator. This has been a topic really near and dear to his heart. I thank you for being here. We certainly will continue the conversation. But I want to move on to, we have several important housing conversations. One is a quick update on the rental assistance and Cdbg. That is Megan and David.
Hi, Anna. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to give a quick update about our rental assistance program. We're getting this data from INHS monthly. The stuff I'm going to report today is from Wednesday of this week at the end of the day. So there's been a total of 94 applications at this point. 37 of those were in the city, 52 were in the county outside of the city. And they also report they have 4 outside of the county where they have funding.
David, it's really hard to hear you.
Oh, I'm not sure why. Does being louder help?
Yeah, that's better. Thanks.
Okay. So I'll repeat what I said then. We have 94 total applications. 37 of those were in the city of Ithaca, 52 in Tompkins County outside of the city, and 4 in other counties that INHS is working with. So far, of those 94 applications, 28 of them have been not been able to help because the applicants did not meet the requirements of the program. 37 are currently moving forward. 21 of those are outside of the city and the county. There's still people that INHS is working with getting the rest of their documents filed. Of the people who have not qualified, it's a mix of reasons. 6 of them didn't have a demonstrated COVID-related financial impact. 1 was a dependent. 6 had roommates but applied as individuals, which you have to apply with your whole household. 8 of them had more assets than are allowed in the program. You can't have more than $5,000 in liquid assets available. 1 of them didn't have a rent burden. 4 of them were Section E or VASH tenants that have their rent reduced when their income goes down. And 3 of them just didn't complete the required forms. So overall, with where we're at with applications in terms of the county's funding, we have applications for approximately a quarter of what we can support. So we definitely still have room for more people in the program. As some of you may have heard, that I think there is some substantial confusion out there between the cancel rent conversations. Some people think that rent has been canceled and that they don't need to worry about it. There's a bunch of overlapping laws that have come into play. So the federal eviction moratorium expires this week. That moratorium applied only to federally subsidized housing and housing with federally backed mortgages. So either single family or multifamily that has a federally backed mortgage. We had a state moratorium that was significantly more broad. There were just no eviction proceedings until June 20th. Since June 20th, eviction proceedings have been allowed, but there's still been a stop on evicting people who have had a COVID-related reduction in income. And there have been no late fees for late rent allowed during the crisis.
David, I think your paper might be covering your speaker.
Oh, that process and those requirements or protections end on August 20th. But the governor recently signed what's called the Tenant Safe Harbor Act. So it doesn't prevent eviction filings. It provides a defense in an eviction proceeding that if a tenant has had a reduction in income due to COVID-19, that is a defense against eviction. Landlords can still file cases to get money. They just can't actually evict tenants for that specific reason. And that Tenant Safe Harbor Act is, it doesn't have an end date. So it's for any month's rent starting the 7th of March until the state decides that the emergency is over. So as those different executive orders and laws have come through, the amount of protections for tenants has reduced, and I would expect that we will see more people applying as we start seeing more evictions in the coming months.
So in summary, the reductions in support have been the federal reduction because of the loss of the moratorium at the end of this week. And at the state level, it was a little muffled. What was the reduction in protections?
Oh, so the original state moratorium was just no evictions would be processed by courts. That went through June 20th. Since then, there have been no evictions for people who have a COVID-related financial impact. And that ends August 20th. The new law, Tenant Safe Harbor Act, doesn't prevent the filing of eviction cases, but it does give a defense for tenants if they're being evicted for non-payment and their non-payment is because of a provable COVID-related financial impact to them. That is affirmative defense in an eviction case, but they still have to get to that point of having a case. And we know that actually most evictions, most people being pushed out of apartments don't actually get to the point of having an eviction order served. It's usually much faster and outside of the legal system. So there are some continuing protections for people in that specifically COVID-related lost income sector, but they can still have an eviction filed against them and have to go to court, and they can still have a financial judgment. So I think it is really important to get the word out there that none of these things actually say that someone doesn't have to pay rent. The rent is still due, and it's programs like the one that we have that can help people meet that burden if they lost income and are unable to pay rent.
How much money do we have left? What's the balance in this program?
So we currently have most of the funding remaining. We've only received applications that would take 1/4 of the county's contribution to the funding, but not all of those applications were accepted. So we still have more than 3/4 of the funding remaining.
I see Henry has a question, and thank you so much, David, for the report.
Yes, thank you for the report, David. You mentioned that the city had received applications. I assume is that the money that the city put up, or is that INSH money that can also be used in the city?
It's a combination of both. So INHS has slightly different restrictions on their funding. So if they're able to fund someone that the city's funding or the county's funding can't fund, they will try to do that. So I couldn't tell you how many people have been funded by the city, just where the applications are.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for David? Thank you so much, David, for the report. And we'll have to keep talking about how we can get that word out. The program's really important. I know I've been putting it in my daily summary, but I haven't gotten any direct feedback. I'll keep putting it in, and all of us as legislators will, obviously keep reaching out when we hear people who may benefit. So moving on, Martha, did you?
Yeah, just maybe another round of press releases from Dominic. That would help.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So we have a TCAD monthly report in our packet. I see Heather is still here. Would you like to add anything to the report that is here?
I did have Kathy Covert send to all legislators a copy of the press release that we sent out on the PPP, just identifying that it was a tremendous boost to a number of businesses, allowing them to keep employees on the payroll, and acknowledging that our local lenders really played a critical role in facilitating those loan applications. Over 75%, I think, of the loans approved through PPP were via a local lender. So kudos to them. And if you haven't heard them on the radio, we're doing a series of consumer confidence pieces, highlighting local businesses in Tompkins County and what they've been doing to pivot, survive, and some of them even thriving during COVID. They're on our website at tcad.org if anyone was interested in listening to some of our favorite local community and business leaders.
Thank you so much, Heather. Did anyone have any questions directly for Heather about the report? Heather, I had one question was specifically related to some of the grants that you have all put into place to help through this COVID process. Could you give us just a quick summary of those so that the community is aware of them?
TCAD has put in place an emergency loan fund for traded sector businesses. Those are businesses that sell a product or service outside of Tompkins County, not so much captive to the local market. We do still have enough funding to do maybe 2 loans. Those are 3-year loans, but there's no payment for the first year. We also partnered with the City of Ithaca, the Downtown Alliance, the Chamber of Commerce, to do a small forgivable loan program for those more retail commercial businesses. That fund has been fully subscribed. Off the top of my head, I think there might have been 97 of those that were awarded. And then Tom Knipe has taken the lead. We all sort of provided some resources, but received some funding from an anonymous donor at the Community Foundation, and has started a small loan program for, again, those sort of Main Street commercial retail businesses in the city of Ithaca. So Tom Knipe at the City of Ithaca is the contact on that one.
Just one last thing. You are also working on an economic recovery plan collectively. Is that correct?
We are starting to talk about putting together a sort of a mini strategy that will really start to kick off early August.
Great. I look forward to hearing about that.
Thanks.
I know you've got your hands full. So I don't see any other questions. Heather, thank you always for these thorough reports. And we have one more topic for today that I have asked for. It's something I think that's really exciting, and I'm super impressed by the dedication and work that the Human Services Coalition. We have Kathy Schlother, the director, and Liddy Barger, who is the brains and passion behind, I think, this project, continuum of care and reducing homelessness in the county. This is particularly important, I think, in the current pandemic that we're in. So I've asked them to come and speak about a strategic planning process that they are working on. If I understand correctly, Amy Hendricks, you are chairing the committee that's working on this. So I'm glad that Amy is here as well. So in the last minutes of this meeting, I wanted to just get an overview. If people are willing to stay 5 minutes, we can give a good 10 minutes for this presentation, if that's okay with everybody. Great, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to lead it off. We will try to be brief. We started this process about a year ago with a large group of participants. With Anna and Martha, like I said, Amy's on it, Katie, Kit from the county, Nels from IRA. We have representatives from domestic violence, mental health, shelter, alcohol and drug, and supportive housing. So we have a fairly big group. We got a little bit waylaid by the COVID, and it is really hard to do strategic planning with a large group, with probably any group over Zoom. So truthfully, early on, we kind of focused on two very overarching goals. And the one we've spent a lot of time on is preventing homelessness from occurring. And we kind of divide that into two groups. One is people who become homeless because of financial reasons, basically. That group, the vast majority of do not end up being homeless. They might be in some unstable housing for a while, but basically they need a little financial support to get back on their feet and often don't need long-term case management. And then there's another group that are, for better words, kind of non-compliant tenants who, for a number of reasons, including behavioral health reasons or just kind of not really great living skill reasons, have more difficulty being housed and need pretty intensive support. So to kind of look at that goal, we wanted to look at what our response system was now and how do we shore up that response system. The other goal was, if homelessness does occur, to make sure that it is brief and only one time. And, you know, Katie and Megan and David have all done a great job, and everybody knows of demonstrating how much housing we don't have here and how much housing we need. So one of the things, along with continuing to get more housing and more supportive housing, which we will support, but how to open up more of the existing housing to people who have housing choice vouchers and special groups that need housing. So those were kind of our areas we're looking at now. We're in the process of pulling all the data and information we looked at together and presenting a plan to the group to comment on. And I am going to, let me see if I missed anything here. I don't think so. So I'm going to pass it over to Liddy now to talk a little bit about the data we may have looked at and some of the efforts that they've been doing for the past couple of months around homelessness that we hope to continue. Liddy?
Hi, thanks, Kathy. You can hear me? I'm on my phone and video. Okay. Thank you for having us. So when, I think it was in November of 2019 when we started working on this plan, we came together as a group and we wanted to take a look at, you know, our current homeless response system and who had what data about what population. And some of the questions that we were seeking to answer is, what does homelessness look like in Tompkins County? Where are people experiencing homelessness living in our community? And then some sort of more specific, you know, how often do people return to homelessness? And what is the length of time that people spend in our emergency shelter system? So one of the things that happened sort of in the middle of our strategic planning process is that we changed the homeless management information system database that we use, which really unlocked a lot of ability for us to take a deeper dive into our own community data, because we have what's called an open system now, where we can see people's sort of journey through the homeless response system. Our previous HMIS system was what's called a closed system, so you could only see your own individual project data. That has just been a helpful thing as we're getting data. What we learned is that, I mean, I'm doing this as fast as possible because it's 11:30, but basically people with more support have less returns to homelessness. and that we have a fairly long length of time in our shelter. So once people enter our shelter system, there's sort of a jam up in our shelter system. It takes a lot longer to get out of emergency shelter than it might to just have a diversion event where you are on the brink of becoming homelessness, but you are quickly rehoused without ever entering the homeless response emergency shelter system. We also looked at our racial equity data. HUD right now is putting a strong emphasis. They were already getting there, but with COVID and current events, they're really putting a strong emphasis on an equity framework for our data. We certainly have a disparity in our homeless people experiencing homelessness of about 38% of our shelter population is Black, as compared to our 4 or 6% county population. So that is something that we're going to continue to look at as sort of like an underlying sub-theme in our strategic planning. I think it's pretty timely and important work for us to do. I don't know how much or little people really want to know. So I'd be happy to just sort of answer questions. And then once we have our final product, what's our timeline exactly, Kathy? Do you want to share that?
Yeah, I think we hope to have a draft out this fall that we can share with the group.
Right.
And of course, much feedback or how much changing. I know I've been working on plan. Amy's been putting things together. So I think we should be able to have a rough draft out to the group probably, by the end of August.
Great.
To have people comment on. They're also, Liddy just sent out a tenant survey to people to try to get a little information about how insecure people feel about their housing right now. So
yeah,
get the results.
I'd be happy to go over that quickly. I mean, it's been sort of, it was touched on a little bit by David West's update. I have been in a million conversations recently where people are talking about this avalanche of evictions and what's happening and all of this tension and anxiety about pending evictions. And I wanted to try to find out how real that felt from the tenant perspective or where people were at. So I created pretty much the most anonymous and basic set of questions that I could to assess where renters are at in terms of how they feel about their housing security. The questions included things like, have your finances been affected by COVID? Do you pay, what portion of your gross income do you pay for rent? Do you worry about being evicted was one of the questions. And I've had 122 responses so far. It's been a pretty interesting set of responses. What I'm finding, what the survey is showing me so far is that a few interesting things, but basically what it looks like is people are choosing to use all of the money that they have to pay their rent and are feeling like they don't have money to pay anything else. So for right now, I only had I think there were 3 respondents who said that they hadn't paid rent at all since March. Most people had paid either full rent or partial rent for every month, March, April, May, June, and July. But a lot of people, 71%, I think is the number that we're at right now, of people reported not paying debt specifically. And then second to that was utilities. So that was pretty revealing to me about people's priorities and sort of like where we're at with evictions. We'll see. The survey is going to be open until August 1, and at that time, I'm going to compile data. If you have networks, I know Anna, you put it in your summary one time. If people have networks that they want to send it out to, I welcome responses. I do want to get a well-rounded response that is representative of our community. Yeah. And then as far as shelter numbers, I know people are sort of like always kind of interested in shelter numbers. So I ran numbers this morning. We have 87 people in the motel and 10 people in-house in emergency shelter. We are seeing a pretty slow but steady uptick in the encampment population at this time. On Tuesday, I asked our enhanced street outreach team to do a head count for me, and the number that they came back with was 47 people who are living in the encampment. So that's higher than average. It's even a little higher than our normal summer number. Normally, it's pretty much hovers around 35 people usually in that encampment. And I don't know, that's the quick and dirty. I know we're all trying to get on with our days. So let me know if you have questions. I'll put those survey links in the chat. I saw someone ask for that.
That would be really helpful. And, I'm sorry for the short amount of time, but I did feel that this was really important. One, that the whole committee knew that this work was being done. And two, just to get the conversation started. And once there is a more comprehensive strategic plan, I would definitely love if we could revisit this conversation. This for all committee members, this really was intended to just be an introduction so that you knew this was happening. I didn't want us to be doing this work behind the scenes and then have you all find out, wow, you've been meeting for 1.5 years and you've come up with this great plan and it's gonna, we need to invest in it in X, Y, and Z ways, and we didn't know it was happening. So this is sort of the initiation of that conversation. With that in mind, did anybody have any quick questions or directions or recommendations or thoughts to add to the work that is being done, led by Kathy and Liddy and Amy? And I don't know if Amy, you had any last minute input to add to this as the chair of the committee.
Not really. I mean, Lydia's really led this through with everything that happened with COVID. We had a plan in place and she's made sure that we're still going through that plan and using data to kind of drive those decisions as we pull it together. So really it's Lydia and Kathy have pulled this all together. We appreciate that.
Absolutely. So I will bring you all back. Annie, you had a last question for the group.
You're on mute.
Thank you. I thank you for the link, Liddy, to the renter survey. So I was able to open that. Is there any information or a place where I can put information about it to say who it's from and what it's going to be used for?
Yeah. So I put a thing on the listserv that was like very general yesterday. I can forward it directly to you. It's basically, we're using it to, the way I frame it for people is we're using this to guide community conversations about where resources need to be dedicated, resources and support. So that's sort of the framework. It is anonymous. So I have had a few people being like, call me, I need help. And like, I'm not going to case manage 122 people. So I am trying to keep it pretty general. Like it's really just a check-in. So, but it will guide community conversations.
Okay.
So yeah, feeling around in the dark.
Yeah, if you can get a chance to send us anything so I can have something with it. Thank you. I'll be glad to send.
Sure.
And I have put this in my daily summary. I think, Annie, it was in my 720 one on Monday. Please, anyone, if you want, you can always copy and paste any of the bits and pieces that I include in the daily summary. I did not include it in the one that I sent today, but I will include it again in the one that I send on Friday. So I kind of rotate through information. If there's some things that seem, to need repeat shout outs, I will definitely do that. This is certainly one of them. Unless anybody else, I don't see any other questions. Kathy and Liddy, thank you so much for your incredible work on this. Thank you for this introduction, this sort of 30,000 foot view, speed run. We'll definitely bring this back and put it in the beginning of the agenda so that we can give it the attention it's due. And I wanted to give the opportunity for any last question. We've gone over 10 minutes. I really appreciate everybody's time. Martha, you had a last comment.
Just want to say hi to Ray Slaughter. Hi, Ray. Are you, the continuum of care, is this being reported out to HHS also, or Is that, have you talked to?
I've spoken to Shauna. Shauna and I talked about this a year ago, specifically of which committee, and we're continuing to coordinate, but this would be reported here. I invited her to attend this one. Of course, it's being recorded. She's overextended just like everyone else, but she's aware, and we are continuing to stay coordinated on this.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, so can I have a motion to adjourn? That Martha, seconded by Annie. All in favor, Martha? You know what? I
Yes.
see all of your hands. Henry, you're a go.
Yes.
All right, that is a unanimous vote to adjourn. Thank you everyone for your patience, your attention. This was great information, and I hope you have a wonderful month until our next HED meeting. Take care, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.